All right, thank you. My name is Nathaniel Jones, and I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar, Using Agile to Run Your Performance Analysis Team More Effectively, Lessons from Software Design by Andrew Corney. This webinar is hosted by the IBIPSA USA Research Committee, with the goal to share new ideas from research to the building simulation community. If you have questions during this webinar, please type them in the chat window. At the end of the 40-minute presentation, I will unmute you, if you're on Zoom, for a discussion with Andrew. AIA Continuing Education credit is available for attending this webinar. Please email info@aiaeb.org with your AIA membership number to receive credit for attending today's event. And now, I'd like to turn it over to Andrew Corney. Go ahead.
Thanks, Nathaniel, and thanks everyone for joining today. My name's Andrew Corney. I'm a product manager at SketchUp, and in a past life, I also worked in building consulting as a building performance consultant mechanical engineer. Today, we were going to talk about Agile, to understand what the Agile workflow is, assess potential benefits for considering an Agile process in your work. We'll look through the benefits of applying Agile project management ideas to high performance design consulting. And we'll basically show you how to get started with the Agile process or Agile workflow. So I guess to help me get started, I'm really interested to understand what you know today about Agile before we get started. So I'm kind of interested to hear which of the following best describes your understanding of Agile. And so we're going to launch a poll, and if you'd like to participate in the poll, that would be great. I can't see the poll, Nathan. I don't know if that's, oh, there it is. Okay, great. Cool. Okay, great. I'm going to end the poll then. Thanks for everyone who participated. So it seems like people's knowledge of Agile is roughly where I would have expected it to be. The most common answer is that you know that it's a project management technique used in the software industry, and you're here, which is great, but you haven't tried using it yourself. So that's great to hear. So I guess we will get started with an introduction, and Agile is a sort of project management philosophy that's applied to software engineering. Here we have Phil from Silicon Valley, and in software engineering, managers have spent a long time trying to optimize how much value they get from software engineers. So Agile has been one of the processes that's been developed over time to make sure that software engineers who are working on projects and valuable team members are as efficient and effective as they can be. Now, Guilfoyle is a well-paid technical expert whose job is to do complicated technical jobs well, and that happens to be pretty much a good description for Vim practitioners as well. However, in our field, I guess one could argue that our managers have spent decades optimizing delivery methods and contracts, and perhaps not so much on people management. So, so we have kind of missed out, I guess, on this. I guess revolution is a bit too strong of a word, but these changes that have happened in the software industry. And so, part of what I wanted to do today is to share my experience from software and see if there's a way that you guys can benefit from that in building energy modeling. It may or may not be true that our industry has a productivity problem. I'm sure if you ask someone at The Economist, or if you ask a lot of people, they'll be quite disparaging of the construction industry. We don't really know when it says construction industry, which part of the industry it is. But part of the idea of what we're going to talk about today is how you can make your team and the work that you do I guess, more productive and more effective. And if we're working on designing sustainable buildings, that's got to be a good thing. So I'm going to open up a new survey now, and this survey is about asking you how you know what to work on. And I know it's a Thursday, well, it could be Thursday morning or lunchtime for you, but I want you to think back to Monday morning and ask yourself, like, when do you know what you're going to be working on, or how do you know what you're going to be working on in the coming week? What level of detail would you know? So if you could just start answering the poll, that would be great. A couple more seconds there. It's not that important which one you choose. Okay, great. Cool. So, so we have roughly about most of you know either that you're going to be working on a specific project, or perhaps you know the specific deliverable within that project that you'll be working on. Some of you might know specifically what you need to do, and there are people that have no idea about what they're doing by Monday lunchtime, which in and of itself is potentially a bit to worry about there. So, okay. All right. So I guess, like, I think back to my time at WSP, and we had these Monday morning management meetings, and I don't mean to be disparaging of these meetings, but in consulting, a way a lot of it works is there's a lot of older people sitting around a table divvying up resources, and a lot of the time in consulting, it's really about billable hours. So a lot of the time, the allocation of resources is more focused on the best way to keep the entire team utilized and billing their time, rather than on what specific projects really need resources to do the best job for those projects. So this may or may not be the way your office works, but I'm sure that there are lots of engineering firms that work this way. And of course, if this is a Monday morning management meeting, then it might not be until after this meeting that you actually know what you're going to be working on that week. And this can lead to all sorts of productivity issues. Part of the challenge can be that people don't really know what they're supposed to be doing before they start work. So they're working on a project, and a few of you said that's what you know, that's the level of detail you know. People can be waiting around for instructions on what to do next while they wait for people to decide where they're going to work. Firms can have a tendency to work towards time budgets and deadlines. So rather than working towards a completion of tasks, they're working towards a budget allowed for the task, and that can lead to inefficiencies. People can be fighting over resources. Managers can compete for resources, and then that can lead to people having to context switch and change jobs back and forth and not be able to focus on something. And then potentially people also, if they have a lot of time to do a task, may spend that time inventing new workflows or prioritizing fun rather than high priority tasks, especially if they don't know what the most important things to do are. And so, you know, there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but these things can lead to sort of less productivity in an engineering office. So, so that's, you know, there's some productivity things. So we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about how we sort of try to counteract those problems. But I'm going to, there's only 5 questions, but I'll ask the next question now, which is, I'm really interested to hear when you consider your job is done. So for the work that you're doing, maybe the work that you're doing today after this call, which of the following sort of, like, for you describes when that job would be considered done, or that work that you're doing considered done? Okay, a couple more seconds if you want to throw your vote in. All right, great. So, so a reasonable portion of you have said that you know that there's something that needs to be done tomorrow, for example, or in the next couple of days. But quite a few of you have also said that when your work is done is when you get to the end of a phase of a project or the end of a large piece of work. And that's a really good reflection on one of the problems that Agile is trying to solve. So I'll start by giving you a quote from when I started doing my work. I don't know if I've hidden that properly. Andrew, we need, is there something, can I help? Oh, no. Okay, Andrew, we need dogs, not mice or elephants. So what am I talking about here? We need dogs, not mice or elephants. Well, I would say the Agile process is to some degree about turning elephants into dogs. So the waterfall process, which is on the left here, is kind of like the way that some of you have described the tasks that you're working on and things that are going to be complete. If you're imagining that you're going to be finished when your DD submittal or you're working on a design development submittal that's due in a couple of months, then in some ways you might be sort of following a waterfall process where you have a huge project that's got loads and loads of things that has to get done. And you have a deadline that's quite a long way into the future. And so, you know, it's very hard to know whether you can get that work done on time. And you know, also to sort of imagine working on it and breaking it up. So that's kind of an elephant. It's a really, really big task. It's hard to sort of imagine, get your head around. And what Agile is about is turning that into bite-sized pieces of work that are in and of themselves each deliverable and each achievable within a certain amount of time, each meaningful, and then as a combination sort of combined to be the delivery of the thing that you need to do. Another way to think about it might be if you're climbing up a mountain, you know, an elephant might be getting to the summit. Whereas if you give yourself an objective of getting to the next can or getting to the next milestone or ridge, then it's much easier to focus and know how long it's going to take you and be motivated. So what's good about being a dog or doing dog tasks? Dogs are predictable. So I've sort of laid out the sorts of tasks that sort of people in our industry might be doing and kind of categorize them as mice, dogs, and elephants. So, you know, obviously turning on your computer or calling someone, well, turning on your computer or even perhaps working out proposed LPD, those tasks are perhaps too small to be worth tracking or like measuring. They might not take that long. And calling Dave might not even really be a task unless you know why you're going to call Dave. So they're kind of mouse tasks. And so if you broke everything that you did in a day into these sort of tasks, then you would spend half the time making all the tasks and writing them all down. An elephant is kind of like the other end of the spectrum. You know, I have a drawing set for construction documents. I have a lead submittal, perhaps even, you know, a daylight study. It's potentially too big to realistically know how long it will take. And in some ways, potentially too big to sort of describe easily and succinctly. A dog is like a job that you need to do that's measurable and it's clear when it's done. And it's something that would probably take you around 1 to 5 days to get done. So these are sort of examples of dogs where it might be, you know, collecting inputs for your analysis at the sort of one end of the spectrum, or building a baseline 90.1 model, perhaps at the other end of the spectrum. It's a clearly defined thing that you need to do to make progress to your overall outcome, and it takes a meaningful amount of time. Now, you know, why would you break up the work that you need to do into dog-sized tasks? Well, one of the ideas of Agile is that if you break your work up into these kind of tasks, then you can estimate with reasonable confidence how long it's going to take you to do that task. And if you organize yourself so that you break the work that you have to do up into these tasks, that every task represents a meaningful measure of achievement towards an overall goal, and that they are prioritized and can be done in order of importance, then overall it could potentially be much easier for you to estimate the overall time it's going to take to do a whole project, but also to know when you've completed work and then potentially how to get on with the next thing. So, so you finished some work. I'm kind of interested now. Another survey is whether you celebrate success as part of your work, and when perhaps you would celebrate success as part of your work. So I've got 5 options here for you to sort of choose from, and you know, pick whichever one is most appropriate for you. Obviously, celebration, the word celebration can mean different things to different people. It can be a pat on the back, I guess, or it could be, you know, something more formal. But got a few more seconds if you want to have a vote. Okay, cool. So it looks like, you know, unfortunately, there's a substantial proportion of people who don't celebrate success, and that was sort of somehow my experience to some degree from the industry, or perhaps you celebrate success when the project is completed 3 years after you did the last piece of work on it. And so this is a really interesting sort of summary of, you know, where you guys celebrate success. And Agile is sort of an approach that is to some degree aimed at creating ceremonies and organizing your work, celebrating success. And there's 2 ways to do, there are millions of ways to do Agile, but there are 2 ways of Agile that I want to talk about today. One is called using Kanban, and one is called using Scrum. So we'll cover both of these. Each of these processes is going to talk about a Kanban board, which is a way to organize your dog tasks into something meaningful, and ceremonies, which are ways to keep your sort of work process on track. So let's talk about Kanban now, and specifically how Kanban works. So Kanban is kind of like the beginner's Agile. And the way I'm going to talk about Kanban today is 2 components, 1 which is a Kanban board, and 2 which are ceremonies. And there are 2 ceremonies we're going to talk about, 1 which is called a daily stand-up, and the other one which is called a retrospective. So the first thing that sort of anchors Kanban, I guess, is the notion of a Kanban board. This is sort of like, this is something that you can apply, or people who are really into Agile, they apply Kanban to sort of almost any application in their life. And it's an extremely simple idea, but it's very powerful. So each of these cards represents a task, a dog task, right? So something that is a measurable thing that's going to meaningfully move a project forward, but is measurable in how much time it takes to do. The tasks that are to be done are assembled in a column called to do, and they're assembled in priority order. So the ones that are at the top of the column are the ones that need to get done first, and so on and so forth down to the bottom. So the idea is that, first of all, Kanban is meant to force you to prioritize all the things that you're supposed to be doing, and forces you to declare which ones are the most important, and indeed which one is the most important to do. Then when you're ready to do a task, you move the task from the top of the to-do column into progress. And ideally, as you can see here, this is a Kanban board involving a team, so multiple people. But ideally, you only have one task in progress, and that is the task that you're working on. And you don't work on other tasks while that task is in progress, you just work on that task. And ideally, you finish the task, or at least you get it to review before you take on another task. And if you take on another task, you take on the top task on the to-do list that you are able to do. So it's very structured and it's very zen in the sense that you are taking things one at a time and completing them before you do the next thing. In this Kanban board, there is an in review column just to sort of give an example of like how QA sort of process might work. But you could also just simply have a done column where you, once you finish something that's in progress, you move it to done. Quite simple, very elegant, and very effective. And I think like my wife works at the NHS, and she sort of says that there are people at the NHS who like to say this. The NHS is a national health service in England. And I think this is quite a nice statement as well. Don't pick up a piece of paper more than once. It's kind of the same idea as Kanban, is that what you work out what the most important thing to do is, you pick that up, you do that, and then you finish it, and then you do the next thing. And that focus and attempt to avoid distraction is very important. So what's great about a Kanban board? Well, the great things about a Kanban board are that you can start using Kanban today with your own tasks. You can go away from this call and you can make your own Kanban board. You can divide your tasks up into dogs, make a Kanban board, prioritize your dogs, and then start doing them. And what's great is it forces you to prioritize what you should do first, which is actually a really good way to sort of like get control of your workload, especially if you have lots of things that you feel you need to do. It helps you focus on completing that task first, and when done in a business context or a team context, it helps you communicate to other people what you are working on, and becomes a vehicle for you to have a conversation with them about whether or not the prioritization of tasks on that board is correct or not. And if they don't think that's correct, then there's a discussion, but at least there's a vehicle for you to have that discussion and a formalization of the prioritization of the things that you should be doing. You can use a software tool like Trello to make a Kanban board online as well, or you can use Post-its on a Pinboard if you like. So when you do Kanban, there are sort of ceremonies that go with it. And there are two sort of very typical Kanban ceremonies. One is called the team stand-up. So if you're going to do Kanban as a team, then like as I showed you, the board has the tasks that all the team is working on prioritized for the team and perhaps assigned to people already or not. In a stand-up, the team gets together 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, and first of all, celebrates the tasks that have been completed. So the first thing that should happen in a stand-up is you say, what did we finish yesterday? Stand-ups are usually first thing in the morning, they don't have to be. And then everyone says, well, this is finished, and then it's a celebration. Yay, well done, that's really great. Congratulations on finishing that task. Okay, so there is a sense of completion and celebration of that. It's also an update on progress so that everyone can see, everyone can hear a very like a one-sentence update on what people are doing and working on and how they're going with that. There's a way to identify blockers. So if someone's stuck on something or feels like they're going to get stuck on a task, and that's an opportunity for them to get other people to sort of potentially help them with that. And then also if new tasks that have been added to the board need to be discussed or declared, then at least they can be noted. But ideally, you don't spend a stand-up talking about new tasks. You schedule a meeting to talk about tasks if they need to be presented in detail. So a very quick meeting just to keep everyone in sync. And then a retrospective is something that would happen for about 30 minutes, maybe once every week or two at the end of the week. Again, potentially a way to celebrate achievements. And then also to talk about what is working well within the team, what is not working well within the team, And ideally, at the end of a retrospective, you select one area that you'd like to try and improve in terms of your work process. And then you think of a way to action that. And it can be very, very small. It doesn't have to be massively ambitious. It's all about making very small improvements to the work that you do on a regular basis. There are limitations to Kanban. So one of the things that happens in software, and I suspect this would happen if you applied Kanban to an engineering office as well, is it can kind of drift. So there aren't necessarily deadlines deadlines don't always work well with Kanban. So it can be hard to align the Kanban process with deadlines. And also the sort of like conveyor belt nature of the to-do list can sort of make it harder for the team to be focused on bigger goals and milestones as well. And the other thing too is that even though as a team now you can see what each other's working on, Kanban doesn't necessarily encourage you to work together or pull together as a team. It just gives you a framework to see what the other people on your team are doing. And yes, there are stand-ups, and yes, there are ways where people can call out for help, but it's not a system that's sort of like geared around working together as a team to achieve an outcome. So there's some limitations of Kanban, but it's very easy to get started, which is good. So I like one last survey now. I'm interested in hearing about like who decides how long you need for a task. So I guess the question would be, when you're doing work at work, who has decided how long it's going to take you to do that task before you get it done? Okay, a couple more seconds if anyone wants to throw in the last vote. Excellent. Okay, cool. So great. So really encouraging to see that at least 38% of people are asked before they start work, and also while they're working on things. So that's really nice. But fully, 60% of you are sort of not in control of how long you will take to do a job. You're either told how long it's going to take you, or you don't know how long it should take you to do. And so this is something that one of the things that a Scrum process is aimed at trying to improve. Okay, so Scrum is a little bit more detailed, but I'll try and walk you through the diagram and give you an idea of how it works. So first of all, the overriding principle of Scrum, and I don't know if you know what a Scrum is in rugby terms, but in rugby, a Scrum is like basically a bunch of players who get together and push another bunch of players together in a huddle to try and push the other team off the ball, essentially. So it's a very good example of teamwork. And the Scrum idea is the idea that you work as a team to achieve a set of outcomes rather than as a group of individuals. In a company, there's probably a project pipeline and a series of managers. And in a Scrum process, what's supposed to happen is that the managers in the company are continuously working out what the backlog or the work that needs to be done ideally in terms of dogs, to be honest, is, and ranks them in order of priority for the people who are doing the work in the company. Okay, and this becomes the work backlog. And then every 2 weeks or every cycle, so actually sprints can go for it can be 1 week cycles up to 4 week cycles or whatever. 2 weeks tends to be quite good. There's a ceremony, which is a sprint planning session. And in the sprint planning session, the team of people who are working in the sprint start to take items off the top of the list and estimate them as a team, how long they'll take them out, and pull off as many things as they can commit to doing within that period, as they're comfortable committing to doing, that they can. So it's all about the team estimating the tasks, what they look at. Remember, if they're dogs, they should be fairly easy to estimate. And then the team committing to the team being able to do all the tasks that they've taken off. And then what happens is those tasks go into the Kanban board, so they become the to-do list. And if it's a 2-week sprint or however long the sprint is, the team as a whole works on getting through all of those tasks. And every day they have a stand-up where they discuss how they're going. And there might be someone in the team who's the scrum master, who's sort of like managing the process of just the process of like organizing who's taking on what tasks and whatever, if there's any doubt about that. But at the end of the sprint, ideally, all of the tasks are completed and finished work is delivered and celebrated. There's a ceremony, which is a retrospective to talk about how the sprint work went, and a review of the sprint as well, and perhaps even a presentation of what was delivered to the managers back at the, if they're interested, right? So this is a process that essentially these people have control over what to do and what the most important things to do are, but the team has control over how they commit to those things and how many of those things that they do. And obviously, you know, in a work environment, the more you commit to do, the more high performing a team you are. But also that's your choice, I guess, as a team. So what's really great about Scrum is that the team decides what it can do over the set period of time, which is called the sprint. And then the team is collectively responsible for delivering the work over the sprint. So a really good Scrum team, if the work isn't all completed in the sprint, it's everyone in the team's fault. It's not just one person in the team's fault, because everyone should be working together to see how they can get that work finished. So the other thing that's really great about Scrum is that ideally, once the team has taken on the work and the managers are happy with the work that they've taken on, or that the managers aren't supposed to criticize estimation, but if they want to change their mind about which things to do, then that's in planning that can happen. Then once that happens, the team should ideally be left alone to complete that work. And so it can focus on all those tasks, it knows which tasks it's doing, and it's not being distracted during that time. And then, so then the big advantage is that once the teams are working well, management gets a predictable cadence of work and actually gets the work delivered in arguably potentially the most efficient way possible, because the people who are doing the work are choosing which tasks to do and declaring how long it's going to take them, and then trying to work towards committing to those tasks. And it's also really easy for management to see what people are working on and when the work is expected to be completed. So there's lots of certainty around a Scrum process once it's working well. Scrum can be tricky though. So one of the hardest things about Scrum is, and I'll go back to the slide, is this idea here of the management knowing the prioritization of the things that they want their team to do, and actually being organized enough to make that prioritized list. And thinking about my own experiences in an engineering firm, I suspect that this could potentially be one of the biggest challenges to implementing Scrum in a medium to large size firm. But ultimately, this does empower managers more, but also requires them to declare what's most important and pushes them not to change their mind as often as they might change their mind, you know, today, for example. So, you know, give or take there. The other thing is that, you know, depending on the team, it might not be that easy to share responsibility for work. So if you are like in a team of people with lots of different capabilities or different skill sets or different levels of seniority or experience, it might not be that easy for different people to chip in and help other people on the work that they're doing. The other thing about Scrum is that it can be very frustrating if you have something urgent come in and then a team's just started a sprint, and you now want that team to work on something different. Most Scrum processes will allow for a way for management to sort of force something into a sprint and discuss what should be taken out of the sprint. But it's it's not the same as people just being able to wander up in the office and say, oh, can you do this for me now instead of that other thing, because this is the most important thing. And as I said, it requires the managers to have tasks that are ready to work on. And I suspect the transition would be hardest on managers. So that's kind of like a super high level overview of Agile. And if you want to start being an Agile samurai, I would be completely and wholeheartedly supportive of the idea. For yourself, start to organize the work that you have to do into dog-sized tasks. Make a Kanban board and prioritize them on the board, and then try to focus on completing them one at a time in priority order. I know that it's hard, but you try to do that. As a team, potentially organize your whole team's work into dog-sized tasks. Start a process of a daily stand-up where you share what you're working on, and then celebrate the success that you are having when you finish those tasks, so that you get a sense of completion and a sense of satisfaction that you're actually doing something on a regular basis. And that's it. So plenty of time left to talk about this if anyone has any questions. I can't see the question sheet, but I'll leave it open to the rest of the team to start the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. That's been a great presentation. I really love the aspect of recognizing and celebrating the work that people do. We do have time for questions now. I can see there have already been a few that have been submitted, but if you have your own questions, please write them in the chat. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can type them into the moderator. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can use the chat function there. While people are taking a minute to formulate their questions, I want to start by asking one of my own. So I'm curious if there are any special ways that a process like Kanban applies to simulation tasks. So often we have a job where we're really in the moment, and we go to press run, and then we have to wait, so we switch over to another task instead of the one that's maybe top of the list. How do we rationalize that kind of workflow with Kanban?
That's a really good question, Nathaniel. I mean, I think that I guess it depends on how long your simulations are going to take. I would say that there's always time to, there's always going to need to be time to what we would call polish or refine the tasks that you have coming up. So, that although that can be done, in ceremonies, it's a good thing. It's always a good idea to have a very clear plan about what your upcoming work is going to be. So, for example, if you're doing a simulation exercise, what's the hypothesis of what you're hoping to achieve, or what this simulation is going to do? What are the options or the things that you expect to study as part of that simulation process, etc. And I would say those are the sorts of things that are great to sort of do if you have downtime in between, substantial downtime while you're waiting for a simulation to run. Also, you can just take a break because we don't have to be working like all the time. But if you do want to be super productive, then that's a suggestion. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. I see we have a related question coming from Chris Schaffner. Chris, do you want to go off of mute and ask your question? Let me allow you to go off mute first.
Yeah, hey, this is great. Thanks everybody for doing this. So my question, I don't know a lot about software development, but I do know a little bit about building energy simulation. And I'm thinking about our team of 8 folks here at my office. And I think a big difference is that in software development, my sense is everybody's working on kind of one big thing. And whereas we have each modeler working pretty independently with different clients and different projects, and maybe at most we've got a team of 2, a junior person checking in with a senior person. So it feels like if I was to bring everybody together every day to talk for 10 minutes, they're all working on different unrelated things, and I'm not sure I see how that's going to work out. So how do you see that working in that kind of an environment? How do you see Agile working in that kind of environment?
Well, it's a great question. Thanks for your question. I think the first thing that I would encourage is to go back to the idea of Kanban, which can be applied to your own personal work as well as work as a team, and look and have the people in your team look at the projects that they're doing and try to divide their work into more measurable sized tasks. And perhaps they already do that, which would be great. But the big advantage of this process is that you become, as I said, more predictable in how long it's going to take you to do things, and then therefore like how you communicate that to clients, or how profitable your own business is able to be. So even just if that was the case, that you're all like working on quite independent things, even to go through the process of having people create their own Kanban board of tasks that they need to do could be a very powerful process to improve their own efficiency. In terms of like then whether you need to have ceremonies to discuss what people are doing or to celebrate success, you could, rather than having a stand-up every day, if there's really nothing that people would need to share with each other, you could sort of limit it to a retrospective where you have a ceremony at the end of every 1 or 2 weeks where you talk about the work that's been delivered, and you talk about like how things are going or how your work processes are going and whether there are opportunities to improve.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from Gokul. Gokul, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew, for your presentation. That was really nice. My question was about with the dog tasks and the elephant tasks. If you've seen people assigning just one person for one dog task and making it more repetitive, and if so, does that affect the overall development of an individual? Sure, it might get the task, the overall project done faster, but what happens to the individual's development in that case?
Yeah, so it's a great question. There's definitely opportunities for, well, as efficiency potentially is brought into a business, there's probably a tendency to improve efficiency by having one person put the toothpaste cap on and the other person fill the toothpaste up. And so yeah, I think there's definitely scope for that. I think that's where well, I guess this is never going to be a substitute for like professional development sort of process for someone with a manager, right? So one of the ideas, if you are working on a Kanban board as a team, ideally if all of the team tasks are prioritized properly and someone else can pull in the top task, then really that top task should be pulled in by the first person who's capable of doing that task, right? So in a sort of very brutal sort of situation, if you have a lot of the same tasks, you might have a scenario where ideally you have different people doing that task. However, yes, like I guess another vehicle where that sort of concern could be raised is in a retrospective, where someone could say, oh, like, I think we're doing really well, but, I'd like to be able to do other tasks. And so, next sprint or, starting next week, could someone else take on this task? And that's what's great about retrospectives is if they're done well, they are an opportunity for everyone in the team to share sort of like how they would like to improve the process that they're working under.
All right, thanks. We've got a couple more questions coming in, and please take some time to type your own question into the chat. I want to also take a minute to remind everyone that AIA learning units are available for this presentation. And if you want them, send your AIA membership number to info@aiaeb.org. Also, if you join us on YouTube, please take a minute to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And now we've got another question coming in from Jiafeng. Jiafeng, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, hi, and thank you very much for this. Sorry, I'm in my daughter's bedroom trying to get her to sleep, so that's why my camera and image looks really creepy. Anyway, so I've got two questions. Basically, one is about how does the time box related to sprint and overall kind of the time allocated for the dog planning or execute a dog project, dog tasks. So the second one is, I wonder whether Scrum and Kanban are the kind of agile tools to manage, can it be used to manage project on itself as a project management tool?
I mean, they're very much project management tools, yes. So, I guess in estimating tasks in Kanban isn't quite so important. So when when you're trying to work out like the tasks to do, the idea of like how long it will take is really so that you're not I guess the idea with task creation is that it's meaningful, but it's it's a smaller something that is actually meaningful can be. And really the point of that is, as I said, is that the cleaner it is, the smaller it is, while still being meaningful, the easier it is for you to work out how long it's going to take to do and sort of stick to that. As I sort of said in Kanban, you're not like, it's actually quite hard in Kanban to sort of like overlay deadlines and things. It can be quite tricky. The only vehicle a manager has is the prioritization of tasks. So, obviously if there are tasks that have deadlines, then they go to the top of the to-do, urgent deadlines, they go to the top. In Scrum, the way that it's supposed to work is that the team, like when they're working out in the planning session, like which tasks to do, they actually vote for each of these tasks. Each person votes at the same time on how long they think that task is going to take. And if they think that it's going to take a really long time, then they use the planning session to break it up into smaller tasks, and then they vote on the smaller tasks, right? So they sort of treat it still as one whole thing, but then they break it up and they try to make it into things so they can feel confident that that they're making a commitment that they can stick by, right? Part of the whole idea of Scrum is you're empowering the team to tell you what work that they can actually get finished in a 2-week period. And then you're letting them be in charge of actually doing that. So it can be, as a project manager, that can be a little bit, at first it can be quite, difficult, but the advantage is that what you find is people, when they're making their own commitments to what they can do, then they're usually more serious about making sure that they deliver on those commitments. So yeah. I hope that answered your question. I don't know if it did or not, but
yes, certainly, that's really helpful. Sorry, sorry, probably I missed. In terms of time box, what is time box really related to the kind of planning horizon or sprint?
So what do you mean by time box? Do you mean like do you mean, what do you mean when you say that exactly? So I understand.
Sorry, I just heard the term, not in your presentation.
Oh.
Just some people talking about Agile and then or project management Prince 2 Agile. They're talking about time box. So,
well, yeah, okay. So in some in some tasks, it can be quite difficult to know how long it's going to take to do that task. And so sometimes then what time boxing means is that you sort of say, okay, we want you to do this task, but we don't want to spend more than 5 days on that task. Okay. And so that's the box of time that you're allowed to spend on that task, and you work towards the time limit. Generally speaking, one of the other drawbacks of Scrum generally is that if you're not committed to delivering really good quality work, you can have people sort of like racing to finish the work and then not doing a good job on it, I guess, if you're not careful. And that's why definition of done, definition of work being complete is really important in this process. And I mean, this is a very high level overview of Agile, but yeah, that's sort of what a time box might be, how time box might be applied in this process. No worries.
All right, thanks for that question. I want to build on it a little bit. When you think about the role of a manager in an Agile process, can a manager also focus on one task at a time, or does the fact that you have people who you're supervising require you to constantly shift back and forth between tasks?
Good question, Nathan. So Nathaniel, so in this diagram, and sort of to some degree in software as well, the team is comprised of technically capable people who are executing work. And although you can have a manager be part of the team and sort of potentially say that they're spending half their time, or they've got like a certain proportion of their time allocated to doing technical work, that can work. It's also potentially the situation that the managers are not actually expected to deliver any of the work that the team is doing. So it depends on how you sort of organize yourselves. Both things can work, where you can have that manager have a certain amount of time committed to the team, or they could be potentially separate. In a lot of cases, these structures, like in software, this is my job, the product manager. So like, and the product managers somehow kept a little bit separate from the software developers, in the sense that they say what they're in charge of choosing what the things we're going to do are, and then the development team is in charge of deciding how long it's going to take, and when they're going to do it, like not when they're going to do it, but basically how long it's going to take and how to do it. And that's really important, a really important distinction. And I think in an engineering firm, it could potentially work well, where the managers are sort of like deciding which projects are coming in, which one's the most important, which pieces of work that they know need to get done are the most important things. And then the team is responsible for choosing the work to do and getting that done.
Okay, well, thanks. We've got a question coming in from Alex. Alex, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I'm really interested in this topic, and I like to kind of learn a lot about software development and think about how to apply things to our industry like this. My question is, I guess, do you have any suggestions or feedback on what the team is in this Scrum scenario? Like, I could see it kind of being at different levels, like Chris was talking about his team of 8 energy modelers, but like I could also see the manager being like the project manager for a project, and the team could be your mechanical designer, your electrical engineer, your civil structural, and the architect or whatever. And I'm also just trying to think, like, how is it done, like in software development? Like, does the front end developer that does like the GUI and stuff, and the back end who does the like APIs and the server or whatever, like the more of like the structural part of the software, like, are they on a same team, or is there separate teams for each kind of section? And like, how does that, what's the best way of doing that?
So great question, and the answer is there is no best way of doing it, and it's continuously debated amongst everybody, including everyone in our team, best way to organize yourselves, and it's it's probably not as simple as I'm making it out in some ways. So we we have teams that are both multidisciplinary, but then also I guess how could I say, like deep enough in each discipline. So for example, if you have a team working on we sort of divide our teams up by the feature or the task that the sort of project that they need to do. So ideally the team is working together on, say, a new feature in the product, which could be a project, and then you have a mixture of capabilities in the team that's working together to do that. That makes Scrum a little bit harder in terms of like having people share tasks, share responsibility for tasks. You could equally like have teams divided up by discipline and have like potentially have teams at front end or back end or whatever working together. There's lots of different ways to do it, I guess. I don't know. I don't have a good answer.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right, thank you. This has been a really fascinating discussion. I'm really glad that we've had this conversation. I want to thank you, Andrew, for presenting to us on Agile, and thank everyone for joining us. Thanks also if you're joining us on YouTube for subscribing and liking our channel. I want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, if you enjoyed this webinar, please consider joining the IBIPSA USA Research Committee. Email research@ibipsa.us or visit the link in the Zoom chat for more information. Please join us again on, this will be not May 27th because it's May 27th today. So the last Thursday in June at noon Pacific time, we'll have Andy Harris, Nastaran Shah Masari, and Reese Goldstein from Autodesk Research presenting on design for COVID-19 and beyond, new use cases for computational fluid dynamics and multi-agent simulation. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.